Hi, it's Jenkins, family law vlogger here. This is the next in the Stages of Divorce series, and this vlog is just going to look at some tax implications of filling in a Form E or providing your financial disclosure in the context of a divorce. In previous vlogs, we've talked about how you fill in a Form E, for example, details of properties, businesses, other assets, etc. I just wanted to flag a few tax points that could be highly relevant. When you're sorting out the finances on divorce, whether you're using mediation, discussing things direct, or indeed through a court, it's really important that you're talking about the current values of assets, but also in particular the net values. So what I mean by that is taking into account any tax implications if, for example, an asset was to be sold or transferred. So this is really an area where you may need some specialist advice on, depending on the structure of your assets and what the complexity of it is. That advice might need to be from a family lawyer, or indeed more possibly from an accountant who specialises in these sorts of aspects. So what are we concerned about? Well, for example, if you put the value of a property into your Form E, the value of a property that you live in, so your family home, may or may not, depending on the circumstances, have tax implications if it was to be transferred between you and your spouse at certain times, or if it were to be sold on the open market. Now, there are certain exemptions, principal private residence exemption, that might apply if it's your main home and if you're both still living there. But that exemption can be lost in certain circumstances or after certain time periods. So it's important not to assume that that applies. If you have more than one property, so say you have some buy-to-let properties or a buy-to-let portfolio of properties, if you were to transfer those properties between you and your spouse or to somebody else, or indeed you were to sell them, then there may well be capital gains tax payable by the owners of that property on the sale, which would reduce the net proceeds in the hands of the person who owns it. So that would be something that would need some advice. What about other assets that need to appear in your Form E? Well, investments like ISAs, if they're cashed in, they don't attract tax in normal circumstances. But other investments, such as, for example, investment portfolios of shares, they may well, if they're sold or transferred, attract tax, usually capital gains tax, which would reduce the net value in somebody's hands. And then I suppose the other final important one is business interests. So if somebody has an interest in a business that's, for example, say some shares in a PLC, if they sold those shares, that may well attract capital gains tax depending on the circumstances. And if you have your own business, so an owner-managed business or a business in which you have an interest that's a private limited company, we'll talk separately in other vlogs about how you value that business interest. But the value of your business interest in such business is likely to attract capital gains tax if it was sold or transferred. And so again, you might well need some advice on what the capital gains tax consequences would be, so that the figure that you're using for your negotiation or in a court context is net of tax. Otherwise, you could structure a deal with your spouse, or a court could make an order, and there could be a nasty shock around the corner if whatever is agreed or ordered then happens, and there's a tax consequence for somebody that nobody's really thought about that actually affects the figures quite significantly. So tax really is a specialist area, and it's important that at the time of your Form E or other disclosure process that you start thinking about capital gains tax and other taxes that may be relevant. Other taxes may be even more relevant if you or your spouse are not living in this country, in England and Wales, because other tax regimes may apply. So, as always with the blog, if you need further information or advice on your particular circumstances, then please do contact me or one of my colleagues in the specialist family and children team at Mills Reeve, and we'll be able to help you or direct you to the right people to give you some advice on the tax side if that's necessary. Thank you.